All right, I think we are up and going. Hey, XPTers. This is Wade, and we got Adam with us tonight. He does not have an official piece for this year at XPT, but after I saw him do a few shows, I knew I wanted him in XPT this year. So he's going to be helping myself and Francis out with the beginning of the whole entire show. But the reason why I have Adam here today is because I wanted to find out more about Adam. Adam, for me, you just kind of came out of nowhere. I had never heard of you before. I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think Heidi Carpenter maybe did a video of one of your pieces from maybe one of Bo's shows. And that's probably where I first saw you. And of course, the first thing that I'm attracted to is the fact that you're using marionettes, which is an art form a lot of puppeteers do not uh, readily use. It's very difficult. Strings get all messed up. So
Yeah.
it's understandable why most puppeteers don't want to get started with marionette puppets. So, saying all that, um, well, I guess let's start with the easiest thing. Are you originally from Atlanta? Is this where you grew up?
I grew up in North Texas, moved to a suburb of Atlanta when I was about 12, I want to say, whatever age you are in like eighth grade.
Yeah.
I've been here ever since. So it's like this is pretty much home to me at this point. I don't have contacts or anything, any childhood friends that I am still in touch with or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, I've been in the area for a while, but just sort of watching puppet stuff from the sidelines up until a couple of years ago.
How did you first get involved with puppetry, or how did your interest first come about with puppetry?
When I was always interested in puppets. They were always part of my life. Marionettes specifically. I have my very first marionette that I received from my fifth birthday. I still have it. And when I was living in Texas, there's a state fair every year at the I think it's just called the Texas State Fair, and there was a puppet show. There were several puppet shows there. There was one that I saw that I really enjoyed, and I guess I didn't know what it was at the time, but if I recall correctly, it was Czech Black style puppetry, and it just blew my mind as an elementary school student. I thought it was like the coolest thing, and I remember they had it was a chair, but it was individual pieces operated by several puppeteers, so it could like collapse and like fly around and then come back together and like reconfigure, and it just always felt like magic, and it's always been sort of on the outskirts. And I was able to become really more serious about learning and making when COVID lockdowns happened, because with my job, I was able to work from home and I had a lot more free time. So I just kind of sat around and just kept failing over and over and over again. And eventually kind of put my stuff together, ran into Bo Brown at Dragon Con. And that's when I learned about the Puppet Slam. And my first slam, I want to say it was October 2021. I think might have been like the first in-person slam they had after the pandemic. And I think I might have only missed one, maybe two since
Yeah.
then. But
Well,
yeah,
so the first puppet that you got, was that something you actually asked for, or was that completely random that somebody just bought that for you?
so there was a mall that we would go to, and it was like a special mall. There was like the normal mall where you would go to get like school supplies or whatever, but then there was like the one that was like an hour away, and it was like at Christmas time it was like the special mall to go to and stuff. And there was a puppet shop there, and they had everything, all sorts of hand puppets and marionettes. And I've always had a thing for clowns. There was a clown marionette there, and I was just like absolutely in love with it. And yeah, got it on my birthday, and I still got it.
Was that something that you would practice with as a young kid? Did you get frustrated with it really easily?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Got super, super frustrated with it all the time. Like, I think I wonder if even it might have been hidden from me at some point because I was always coming to mom or dad and being like, like it's all tangled. I don't know what to do.
You'd have them put on the puppet piece for you so you could just watch it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, my dad, not a puppeteer at all, but I remember him showing me, he was like, this is how you make it walk, and figuring out like very like basic things and being able to just kind of play with it. And I was a kid. I was like putting band-aids on it, and like getting balloons from the grocery store and like tying it to its hands and stuff. So
It's awesome. So I definitely want to get to this point of you during the pandemic learning how to make your own marionettes. That's amazing to me. But we have a huge amount a span of time between when you first received this puppet for your birthday and now to 2020 when you're deciding that you're going to create your own. What's happening in between there? Is puppetry something you just kind of put to the side for a while? Do you have other interests going on, or is it constant throughout those years?
it definitely fell to the wayside. I always enjoyed playing with things and like anthropomorphizing. I might be throwing an extra syllable in there, but
Right.
from like I would say late childhood up until really about 2017 is when I started like going to the center pretty regularly. I was really interested in music. I was in and out of local bands, working on my own music. I had interests in digital art and animation, sketch comedy, improv comedy, and that sort of stuff. And I guess sort of timing wise with the lockdown, a lot of that stuff is so collaborative.
Yeah.
And these were all ideas that I still wanted to explore, but it was pretty much just me alone. So, puppetry was kind of like the perfect, it's the sampler of all the arts that I was interested in.
Well, considering that you started making your puppets so recently, I feel like you have a very well developed um, way or idea in which that you want to tell your stories. It seems very clear to you in the way you present your pieces. Um, so is that from something from watching things from the past? Like, how'd you develop that? Were you part of theater at all during these years of development, or it's just this just came out of your head during the time?
I was really into children's theater when I
Okay.
was younger. And then like as I got older, things whatever the local Texas company I was working with became the productions became more and more musical based, and I was like too cool to do musicals and didn't want to sing, and that kind of fell off. But I do just want to clarify real quick, not all of my puppets were made by
Okay.
me.
Gotcha.
Yeah, just don't want to take somebody else's credit.
Sure, sure. Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, I have always enjoyed live performance. Cirque du Soleil, huge, huge influence on me ever since I was a kid. And I would say is a big influence on the type of performances that I like to do. Like generally wordless with like ethereal kind of synthy kind of sounds is definitely something that I tuned into at an early age, going to those shows. Um, Same with like I always went to Ringling Brothers when it was coming through, but like Blue Man Group, I liked seeing kind of, and of course live music as well, but yeah,
Yeah.
I mean just live performance, especially if it was like kind of strange. I have always enjoyed that. So I wanted to kind of, puppets I think are kind of, some people can be kind of creeped out by them, so I like to kind of like lean into that just a little bit and kind of
Yeah.
like do sort of a give and take of like, yeah, it's a little creepy, but it can also do like this really cool or cute thing or whatever, and then try to pull people in that way.
Yeah, it's a bit esoteric, and that's kind of why I was asking that question. It's interesting too because even as esoteric that your performance can be, there's such a busker tradition that you're keeping up by your performances, especially the ones I've seen Little Five Points, and they're for everybody. Like I see kids enjoying it as well as adults, where I think most people would think, oh, kids wouldn't be into this because it's not constantly stimulating in the sense of like bombastic noise and all this dialogue and everything. You're very methodical, you're very slow and paced with your
Mm.
performances.
Yeah, yeah, and that's intentional. Going into this, I never saw myself um entertaining children specifically or like targeting younger audiences, but I certainly don't want to alienate anyone. So, I tell people it's like, it is, I think, slightly more adult, but it is totally appropriate for children. I've got friends who bring 4-year-olds to shows and they have a good time. And it also makes it easier, especially the wordless thing. There is no language barrier. Um, I'm not telling people like how to feel or what to think about what's happening, and people can just kind of prescribe their own, however their day has gone so far that day, that might influence what they're thinking about while they watch the show.
Yeah, and there's something to be said too about being a young audience member and being a little bit creeped out by something and not quite understanding it, but the longer you sit with it, the more you get familiar with what's happening. Like, some of the first horror films that I saw, which are nothing like your performances, by the way, but they I was probably a bit too young, maybe 9 or 10, when I was watching some of these things, like seeing The Exorcist. And I remember I couldn't get through the entire end because the ending was just way too much. It scared me way too much. Um,
Yeah.
but it does kind of, especially at such a young age, those images are still in my head. Like I think back to them all the time. So I
Hmm.
think there's something about um kind of playing around with um nightmarish, kind of spooky kind of things that really kind of put those memories in the kids' heads. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with this, but I just find it so fascinating that you open the show with this kind of ominous music, kind of almost Lynchian, David Lynch-esque,
Yeah.
and then you manipulate your voice, you modulate your voice in the recording that it's pretty creepy. But then the
Yeah.
first thing you do is you have a clown marionette that's handing out a delicate flower, which is not
Hmm.
creepy at all. It's just sweet and beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that is 100% intentional. I like to try to subvert people's expectations, especially the greater public. When you say puppet show, they typically have a very specific idea of kind of like a birthday party show, and those are great too. I
Yeah.
love any sort of puppet show, but I like to start it off with that really sort of like strange message, and then the next thing, it's still like pretty slow, but it's nice and delicate, and it's like, oh, okay, like yeah, this is weird, but this is like a safe, fun place where even if there are surprises, it's a very like soft, gentle surprise and never at the sake of the audience.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go back to 2020 or 2021 when you have all this time on your hands. Um, what is the idea? You're just going to spend some more time trying to figure out how to work a marionette, or are you trying to build things at this point?
I wanted to try to learn how to build them. So, what I decided to do, what made the most sense to me at the time, instead of going on YouTube or the library, which is like those are the two places I go to now,
Yeah.
I just bought a marionette
Yeah.
off the internet, and it showed up, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna learn how to like reverse engineer this thing. And it's a really nice marionette, but it's like sewn into its costume. I would have to like destroy it to see how the knee joint was made.
Sure.
So it's like and then the craziest, weirdest thing happened. I was cruising through Craigslist. I was buying any marionette I could because I was like, I want to learn how this one's made. I want to see how the neck works when there's 2 points of rotation. I want to see. I wanted it all. And I saw a listing on Craigslist, and the title was something insane. It was like marionettes, hand puppets, stages, scripts ranging $5,000 to $5,000, museum quality. And there were like only a couple of pictures.
What?
Yeah. And I was just like, and on Craigslist of all places, people don't really put things on
Yeah,
Craigslist.
right.
So I emailed the person, and he got back to me, and the my puppetry partner at the time, I was like, we have to go. Like, I don't even, this guy was just like, yeah, my house is full of stuff, come check it out. And so we drive down there and walk into the house. And I've got a huge music background at this point. We walk into his house, and his living room is a music studio, and there are puppets everywhere. And he's in his like early 70s. His name's Bert. And I'm just like, who are you? Why is all of this here? Why are you only posting on Craigslist? Like, people need to see this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And what was supposed to be just a very transactional meeting, there was one puppet he had that I wanted to buy. He ended up taking both of us. Like, every room of his house had different types of puppets, different ages, usually ranging from like the 1940s, 1950s. So I was like, he was telling me, he was like, this, all these puppets were my dad's. He was very into puppetry. He was the president of P of A one year in the mid 50s or something like that. And I was like, well, the center is right down the road. If you're really trying to offload this stuff, can consider donating it. And he said his dad had already donated so much stuff. So his dad was Archie Elliott, friends with Marty Stevens, who were both pretty big in the puppetry world in the like 50s, 60s, I think. But Bert and I, long story short, Bert and I just hit it off. I was there to buy one puppet. He sent me home with three. Uh, Two of them I restored for him, which really let me get my hands on these like old, wonderful, all wooden, hand carved marionettes. And happy to say that he and I are friends to this day. I'll go over to his house. We've gone out to dinner before, and I've purchased a couple other things from him. And that, I mean, that really was like, where else am I going to get my hands on like a master crafted marionette by Martin Stevens? And I just found it on Craigslist, and that sealed the deal for me.
Amazing. So were
Yeah,
all these puppets that Martin had made himself, or were some of these acquired throughout the years?
it was a a mix of both. One of them I definitely know was made by Martin is one that I purchased, and it is a wonderful lion marionette. I don't have it here with me because it is so delicate that it really cannot perform in its current state. But
Yeah.
others were just gifts. Um, and the unfortunate thing, a lot of puppets, like I mean, these two puppets, this guy hanging upside down and the skeleton, and this guy were all made in like the 1950s, but it just wasn't a thing for makers to put a name or a date anywhere on the figures. So like things kind of get lost in time, and I think it's kind of sad, if you try to like track through paperwork and stuff to figure out who made what, but ultimately it just kind of fades away.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. Um, what are some of the first puppets, or do you behind you, are any of the puppets your first ones to build yourself?
Um, no, these are all pretty recent. This is my show currently. I do have the first wooden marionette. One
Okay.
second.
Yeah, of course.
So this was like summer of 2020 with a Dremel tool in my garage and a block of wood. Just a very simple puppet.
Yeah,
Um, but he's so tiny. I can just like throw him in a book bag and take him with me wherever I go. When I travel, I like to take a puppet to at least like take some promotional pictures or something like that with it. So
sure.
a little guy like this travels well.
So let's stick with this puppet right now.
Yeah.
With that puppet, what was the most difficult part for you to finally get down? I'm sure there were some parts that were kind of easy to understand, but what were some of the more difficult parts for you to understand?
Yeah, the hardest part for me was the knee joint and figuring out how to make it bend the right way and not bend too far.
Yeah,
Uh, and it was just like a process. I've probably made just on this puppet alone, I probably made 3 or 4 sets of legs before I actually got it to work good enough. And I would never change them. I feel like once they're done, I don't, unless they need like repair, I don't like the idea of making a significant change to them. But there are definitely things I would do differently with this if I were to make it today.
was this one ever clothed?
No, I really liked the idea of making this because it is so simple. Like he doesn't even have hips, from from his hips to his neck is just one thing. I liked the idea of it appearing as if it were made either by another puppet or by a child or something. So like all the coloring is just colored pencil, and I didn't try super hard to like make it very consistent with the marks or anything like that. And he's just kind of an annoying little guy.
It's great. It's got so much personality.
Yeah.
Um, so for people who might be interested in learning this themselves, what are some of the tools that you used on that first one and some of the materials that you used as well?
So this one was a block of whatever the craft carving wood blocks are that you can find at the hobby store.
Okay.
Or a soft pine works fine. Um, that entire thing was just a Dremel sander bit and blocks of pine. Um, what I really like to use now is paper mache. I used to hate paper mache. I felt like it took too long, and now I've come to really like the process. So my current process is to sculpt in plasticine, and then I just coat that plasticine clay in strips of paper mache, 4 or 5 layers, cut it open and pull the clay out,
Okay.
which is tedious. I do that for the head and hands, and then body and limbs is just chunks of wood. Usually I try my best to spend as little as possible. I spend a lot of time walking outside, and I'm always finding, little pieces of like trim, or like one day I found it looked like a shipment of like kitchen cabinets had fallen off a truck. And I waited a couple days and I came back and it was all still there. I was like, hey, this is great. I can cut this up and use it for anything. Or like
Right.
other things, because my like I like you said at the beginning, a lot of people are intimidated by marionettes, and I want people to know that it is possible, that anyone can do it, and it doesn't cost. It's not going to be a huge upfront investment. This is a hack that I came up with from Goodwill thrift stores, buying these types of drying racks. You've got so many perfect pieces for making control bars, or sometimes they're different dimensions. You could even use them as body parts. But little things like that, I'm always wanting to, and I don't want it to come off as like a brag, but I want people to know, like, yeah, I made this puppet at my kitchen table. Like, that means you can too.
Right.
I'm not doing anything insane here, and people can do it.
Well, you mentioned earlier that you had a puppet partner.
Mhm.
Was this partner helping you design shows or helping you create puppets?
Um,
Or a little bit both, maybe.
little bit of both. At first it was, I mean, we were living together at the time, and for the first puppet slam, they came home from work and I handed them a script and I said, we're doing a puppet show next week. you know but I mean, she is an extremely talented art, like way better than me in all forms of like sculpture and drawing and textiles. Especially, never I always avoided trying to make puppet clothes, because sewing a sleeve that's like the size of your pinky is
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get
yeah.
it.
Yeah, but as I transitioned into working alone, I had to learn those skills, and I'm sort of becoming a lot more self-reliant on the artistic side of things.
Yeah. Wow. Um, so your first couple of performances were with Bo, correct? Bo Brown.
Mhm. Mhm.
How did you decide to transition from there and be a bit of a busker? And have you
Oh,
done busking before with something else, with the music or anything else?
no, I had never busked before. Always wanted to. When I was younger, my parents took me to San Francisco, and I remember walking through like the tourist district there, and there's like the living statues and magicians and people playing drums on buckets, and I was just like, you can just do this, and it's amazing, and if people like it, they'll just pay you for it. Like, this is incredible. I always wanted to do it. I was talking to a friend earlier today, like my ultimate dream, what I would really like to do is have like some sort of camper van RV set up, and I would love to just travel the country and busk and see what happens.
Yeah, man. I just got the thing that said we got 10 more minutes left.
So
Which sucks. I hate this free stuff. I wish I had the non-free. But anyways, that's what I'm having to deal with. So just so I make sure that I get all the information out, because I have a million more questions I would love to ask you, but we're not gonna be able to get to them all. Um, so you just recently, this past weekend, did another busking act over at Little Five Points again. Are you
yeah.
going to have another one coming up sometime soon that people can see you at?
I don't have anything scheduled yet. I do promote the hell out of every performance I do on social media, Facebook or Instagram.
And
But
what is some of that? What's the social media handle and all that
um,
stuff?
Instagram would probably be the easiest way to find me. It's Mr. Pants for you, numeral four, letter U,
Yeah,
Mr.
yeah.
Pants. Um, but yeah, I mean, right now I'm planning. So Fringe Festival is having a busking event.
Yep,
Uh,
saw that.
I applied to be there. Little 5 Points wants me back. May is super, super busy for me. So maybe early June. Um, and yeah, I don't really have any other shows planned right now, but who
For
knows?
other puppeteers who might be interested in busking, who do you contact to be able to do that?
So that was a unique situation. So I found out about that spot, Finley Plaza in Little 5 Points, through my friend who was my roommate at the National Puppetry Conference.
Okay.
Uh, they were touring their show. I think they toured all the way up to Canada. They started like here in Atlanta, went all the way up to Canada, and they were doing a show in Finley Plaza and needed a second set of hands and knew that I lived in Atlanta. So they had kind of already lined up all the connections. It's through Kelly Stocks with the Little 5 Points Business Association.
Okay.
I do know that Little 5 Points Business Association has an active Facebook page. So if people want to reach out to them, that's probably the best way to start the conversation.
And while we still have a little time left, beyond the help you're giving myself with XPT and starting up the show, what are some of your next moves besides, doing some shows at Little 5 Points? Are you thinking about creating a full show instead of just kind of the miniature scenes that you're kind of doing, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to. Last year at Dragon Con, I did a long form Edgar Allan Poe with an entire cast of clowns. And it was like the 10 most popular Poe stories, and that was a lot of fun to kind of work these stories and like try to make a through line for it and everything. And it was kind of all buttoned up at the end. But the limitation is I only got two hands, and I to do the kind of like full production that I really want to see and what I wanted that Edgar Allan Poe show to be, it's like really a more like a 2 or 3 person job, and I just don't have that team, but I would love to.
Well, count me in, and I'm sure you're going to have tons of other puppeteers from XPT who are also going to say they're willing to help because from what I've seen so far, I just love your artistry. I think it's as rooted as it is in history. I think it's new and fresh, and I'm just very excited to see where you take it in the next 5 to 10 years. I think it's going to be really exciting.
Thanks, man. That's really nice of you. I
Yeah, of
appreciate that.
course.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm really looking forward to where the puppets take me.
Right. You just gotta follow. They'll lead. You just
Yeah,
gotta
yeah,
follow
exactly.
it.